Thanks for joining us on another For Investors, By Investors South Bay podcast. As always, we are proud to be your all-education real estate investment resource without any kind of sales pitch. If you would like to attend one of our meetings in person, we meet the second Wednesday of the month at The Point in El Segundo. You can RSVP at forinvestorsbyinvestors.com/South Bay. To find more investment resources such as blogs and podcasts from other FIBI groups, go to forinvestorsbyinvestors.com and search our library. Now, on to the podcast.
And so I hope you guys really learn as much as possible. This is for you, so keep it as Q&A as much as you guys want. Ask questions. We try to bring professionals up here that know what they're doing, that have that right experience. So no pressure at all, guys. At all. So, yeah, exactly. So, and For Investors, By Investors, all the different chapters throughout Southern California are professional investors themselves that run the chapters, all with that same type of mentality. We have. I run the Long Beach Cerritos chapter, and actually after this I'm going to be doing a follow-up on the 30th on analysis of multifamily and getting into the nitty-gritty of the analysis piece of this and how to break down the math and the numbers. That being said, we also have a chapter in Orange County that's a really big chapter, and Christina here runs the Pasadena chapter. She actually just started another multifamily chapter with Bronson over here that is going to be really interesting up in the Pasadena area, right? Is it Pasadena? Yeah, so we should be, we're expanding, looking really, really good from that standpoint, and everybody seems to be back in the mix of things after the summer is over, and the lull we had during the summer. So thank you guys for coming. Oh, and Jeff here from Culver City, brand new chapter coming up. Jeff, where's your chapter going to be located?
Doubletree. Doubletree Hotel in Culver City, right by the 90 and the 405.
Thank you very much. And that'll be up on meetup.com as well shortly, or is that already up? Not yet. Okay. So it'll be up shortly for you guys that want to go. Definitely, if you guys can support the new chapters and get out to those things, there's going to be some great value. Jeff is a full-time multifamily investor and really, really experienced investor himself, and that's why we were totally fine with bringing him on. Has the same mindset of the no sales pitch type mentality. So thank you guys very much for joining. Dave is going to kick it off with a little bit about this group and what we got going for the panel today and our sponsors.
Thank you. How you guys doing tonight? Good. I actually see that I think we've set a new record for youngest FIBI attendee back here. So congratulations. So thank you guys. We got a full house tonight. Thank you. I know the parking has been terrible. I promise you, starting next month, this whole free concert nonsense will be all over with, and we'll get our parking lot back. So thank you guys for coming. As Matt mentioned, what we have tonight is we've got a very experienced panel here on multifamily. We've got, someone who builds multifamily, someone who renovates and manages multifamily, someone who lends on multifamily, and an attorney that advises all kinds of wealthy families, mostly on multifamily. So, like we like to do with every panel that we do, we always try to pick a topic and then find people that have a perspective on that topic, but not people that are doing the exact same thing over and over again. So, every question that we have tonight, we're going to try to, let these guys answer it, and they'll talk about it within their own discipline. If you do have a question, please raise your hand. If it's something that we're going to talk about later, we may say we'll get to that. If it's something that's very, very personal about your situation, we may say hold that for the post-event networking. But if you got a general question on something, please feel free to raise your hand, and we'll get to as many questions as we can. As Matt mentioned, we've been doing this for close to 6 years now. FIBI as a brand has been around for close to 11 years now. One of the things that we've never done as an organization is actually do a multi-day, some type of conference. We just signed a contract a couple of days ago in November 10th and 11th. We're doing a 2-day conference in Marina Del Rey, at the Marina Del Rey Marriott, and it's called the Intelligent Investor Real Estate Conference 2018. And it's something that we hope to be doing, we hope this is our first annual. So if you'll start seeing some information about that hopefully soon as being a part of FIBI, something that we are co-hosting with Cashflow Connections, which is another organization that really specializes in some commercial syndicated investments. We're a little too early to start announcing who some of the speakers are, but we are tapping not just our FIBI group, but all of the FIBI groups and the different people that we've been dealing with for all the years. We have, on paper, a very impressive group of speakers. So mark your calendars November 10th and November 11th here in Marina Del Rey for a 2-day FIBI conference. And then next month, we're doing a panel here. The title, and I'm going to give Matt credit for this. He wrote this. The title is Tenants Are Crazy, So Are You If Your Rentals Aren't Protected. So we're going to be, that might be your best work. It's a low bar, but
I really liked fixing and flipping without blowing up your marriage.
That was pretty good too. I'll give you that one. Actually, Dave and Carol are here. Speaking of which, so next month, September the 12th, it will be a panel here. We've got Steven Spear, who is an attorney that is also a very sophisticated investor himself. We got Ed, who's Ed Baptist, who is an insurance person, and then we've got Paula. Oh, what's her name? The property management company.
Oh, you're talking
Reed.
About Robin Reed.
Robin Reed, excuse me. So Robin Reed, who also they manage hundreds of doors. So it'll be if you are a single family or a multifamily buy and hold investor, and you're looking for different strategies on how to protect your assets with your rentals. That's a lot we're going to talk about next month. As Matt mentioned, obviously, FIBI, this is you paid what, $20-25 to get in. We don't do this for the money. We do this for the networking and for the connections, all of us here. This isn't, people always ask me about FIBI and, how do you invest with FIBI? And I say, no, you've got it all wrong. That's not what FIBI's about. We're not a bunch of people that are, joining money and making investments together. This is an environment where people can come and network. They can come and learn and meet people to invest with. And while I've never made an investment in FIBI, I think every investment I've ever done, somehow, some way, FIBI's been connected. I've either met someone through the organization, I've met an investor, I've met a lender, I found a project. So that's really what FIBI's all about. So, clearly we've got some high quality education tonight on multifamily investing. When we're done, which we'll wrap up right around 9 o'clock, we're going to ask everyone to go downstairs, and across the courtyard, there's a restaurant called North Italia, and we've reserved the whole patio outside. We've got food. It's a cash bar, and that's the magic of FIBI. So don't just come and hear what these guys have to say and then crawl in your car and drive away. You're missing on the real benefit of FIBI. As you're here, listen to what the questions people ask. As an example, who here has money and they're looking for a deal? Please raise your hands. Okay, who here has a deal and you're looking for money? Okay, so Dave, network with yourself, because clearly, yeah, Dave, meet Dave. No, so if you're here, depending on what you have, right, this is a chance to meet people and just don't grab their card, jot a note on their card, figure out what they're doing, follow up with people. That's really the art of FIBI. We do have some sponsors that we want to say thank you to that do sponsor the club. I think some of them have probably been running behind me here. First of all, the Note Assistance Program. Yep, there she is. She's back there. Jasmine actually was on our panel last month, and if you guys have any questions on notes, we've got all these guys do is focus on notes. So we've got Spira Woodward. I don't think anyone's here from Spira Woodward. Stephen Spear will be a panelist next month. And those guys are really good local real estate representation. UDirect IRA, Jeff back there. So if you have any questions on using your IRA to invest in real estate, find Jeff. Walker Dunlop. Anyone here from Walker Dunlop? Oh yeah, here we go. Right over here.
Hey, David.
So Mr. Wessling here, who likes to say Walker Dunlop, it's not a law firm. It's a commercial lender. You'll get your turn. Keep your mic down. we've got New Western Acquisitions, which is I don't think anyone's here from New Western. These guys are wholesalers on steroids. So if you're looking for property or you're looking to get into wholesaling, grab Deke's card back there. And then our newest is Civic. So Brian, right here, raise your hand. These guys are local hard money lenders, mostly single family, but some multifamily as well, right? Do you guys do some commercial? Value add multi. So if you're looking for some, some private money, hard money, check out Civic. These guys have some great rates and some good terms. All right. Anything else? Oh, last but not least, we do want to say that we are not here. We are not attorneys. We are not financial advisors. The information you hear, you're just getting our perspective as fellow investors. Although Steve here is an attorney, so anything that he says, you can take it as a letter of the law.
I'll be giving you a disclaimer in a minute. They gave me this faulty microphone, so I'm not sure if it's actually working. Can you guys hear me? Mine has a green dot. Yours has a red dot.
Yeah, we'll turn you up a little bit.
Great.
How's that?
Okay. I don't know. Can you guys hear me? Is that good back there? Test. All right.
Good. Well, we try to put it on low. I'm sorry. So anyways, well, without further ado, why don't you guys kind of give us, your 2-minute introduction, and then we'll go from there, starting with Mr. Carvel here.
All right. So my name is Steve Carvel. I'm what I like to think of as a wealth transfer planning attorney. I help really wealthy people pay as little tax as possible. Does anybody have a problem with that? No. Is there anybody in here who wants to pay more tax? I can help you with that too. So I represent a lot of really wealthy families. I thought you raised your hand, Bill. I was wondering what was wrong with you for a second there. Bill didn't raise his hand. I help really wealthy people pay as little tax as possible. And in doing that, I use a variety of structures, mostly centered around family offices. And so most of my family offices are very real estate centric. So I think I'm just up here to give you guys the perspective of the money you're competing against, I think. I wouldn't necessarily call my family's institutional money, but they're probably pretty close to it. So that should give you some perspective.
Hey guys, can you hear me? Yeah. I'm Paul Schoen, and I'm with Schoen Tepler Group, and me and my business partner, we build small boutique apartment buildings here in LA, ranging from 10 to 40 units all over the city. And we do the construction in-house, so after getting screwed by so many contractors, we decided to do it in-house. And then we do also property management in-house, so once buildings are done, we manage them and operate them and own them.
Scott Bickett. I work with Post Investment Group. I run our acquisitions. We currently own about 10,000 units nationwide, mostly from Texas to the West Coast. In about 10 years, we acquired over 25,000 units, sold about 15,000 of them since then, and mostly acquire existing cash-flowing multifamily, but we've also done some ground-up development as well.
Who here was at the panel in January? We did the green opportunity with Jason Post. Jason was one of the speakers that night, so Jason and Scott worked together, so thanks for coming. Andrew.
Hey everyone, Andrew Westling with Walker & Dunlop. I know it sounds like it, but we're not a law firm. We do one thing and one thing only. We finance commercial real estate nationwide. We fuel the growth of those 25,000 units for Post Investment Group, and a lot of it, we are Fannie Mae's largest partner. Last year we did $28 billion in finance. $20 billion of that was with the agencies, Fannie, Freddie, and HUD, which means all multifamily, so about 75% of our business is multifamily finance. Actually about 85% if you count the rest of the capital markets. So I do all agency debt, but I also work with life companies, banks, private money lenders, acting as an intermediary, do a lot of ground-up construction and a lot of renovation and value-add projects.
Thank you guys very much. That was awesome. My name is Matthew Owens. I'm a California licensed CPA and a full-time investor. I flip about 5 to 10 houses a month. We've flipped over 700 of them now in the last 10 years. I wish I would have known in the beginning not to buy in the hood, and they would have been profitable in the beginning. But, you learn some fun lessons, right? So I also do a lot of value-add multifamilies. I raise capital for syndications. We lend capital out to different flippers all over the country. And then we have different turnkey operations in different markets around the country now, and then do a short-term rental business as well. So it's a lot of fun doing real estate, and I can't keep my hands off all the strategies. So it's too much fun compared to taxes and that boring stuff. So thank you, Steve. Appreciate all your help. This guy, you got to give him credit because he deals with some crap that nobody wants to deal with. It's not easy.
It's all smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, there you go.
So my name is David Coe. I am a local real estate agent. Actually, this is my office here at Keller Williams. I've got a team. Actually, Evelyn back here. Raise your hand. She's one of our agents on our team. Our focus is distressed real estate here in the South Bay, we like properties that are distressed. We like people that are distressed. Usually, it's both. So if you have anyone looking or needs some help with distressed real estate, please feel free to network with us. As an investor, I'm a partner in a development out in North Hollywood. We're building some single-family houses. I run a non-performing note fund. Kind of like Matt, we have a hard time saying no to something that we think sounds like a good deal, but gives us a very broad perspective as investors. So thank you guys for coming. We'll go ahead and launch it off. And Steve, I'm going to give you the first question because part of why we invited Steve here, besides being so good-looking, is that the families that he deals with, some very high net wealth families. I think Steve's probably got his hand on the pulse of where the market is as much as anyone that I know. So let's start off talking about the current market. I mean, clearly we've been on a nice run here for about 8 or 9 years. Kind of where do you see the market and where do you see how it's affecting multifamily these days?
So first of all, show of hands, who thinks this is the best looking panel that they've ever had? Yeah, your facilitator over there. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. Joe's dishonest. That's good. So another show of hands. How many of you have been to the State of the Economy lecture that FIBI puts on an annual basis? Anybody been here for that? Right. I used to be a panelist on the State of the Economy, but apparently I was getting it wrong so many years in a row. They moved me to the State of Multifamily.
He's been demoted to multifamily.
So I like to talk about on the State of the Economy cycles, right? I think that we all believe that the U.S. economy, the world economy, and the real estate cycle all exist within this sort of like this perpetual chain, cycle that goes on and on and on and on again. So a lot of experts put the beginning of this cycle at December of 2008, right? So from now to December of 2008, it means we're like 120 something months into this cycle. This is the longest expansion cycle in U.S. history at this point in time. Right? And if everything really is cyclical and we may be facing a contraction, where would you want to put your money in real estate? Would you want to put it somewhere in a type of asset that everyone needs, whereas as the economy maybe collapses, or I wouldn't say collapse, but shrinks a little bit, it's a sector that's going to remain unaffected. And I think that's where you're seeing a lot of investors now moving real estate investment into. You're seeing them moving it into multifamily because people have to have a place to live, right? And multifamily encompasses a lot of different types of properties. It could be anything from apartment buildings to mobile home parks, just depending on which market you happen to be in. So I think we all agree that it's probably cyclical. I think we all know that we're 120 months in, or we're the furthest distance in, or we have the longest expansion cycle in the history of the U.S. economy, unless we all want to agree that expansion cycles no longer matter, and that the current economy is not subject to the general sort of rules and timelines. Something's going to happen. The question is when. For the last 3 years, I've been saying it's right around the corner. I've been saying it's 18 months away, a year to 18 months away for the last 3 years. Well, apparently I'm wrong about that. So I don't know, does that answer your question? I think something's going to happen. I'm not sure when. But for the lady with the world's youngest FIBI attendee ever, Cash Flow for Kids. It's a board game. I just learned about this. It's insane. So you got to start it right now.
Cool. So, Paul, talk about how we're at in the cycle. You guys are building multifamily. You guys are crazy, right? So talk about how that affects your guys' decision making.
We really just try to focus on LA market. Macro level affects us, but we really study the demographics of LA and how many units are being built and how many jobs are being created in LA. So we feel just there's a complete supply imbalance and there's just a lack of housing. So we feel confident in all of our projects. Yes, rents, if there's so the three things I actually look at, I'll say this, is one is supply and demand. I think we're very safe in LA. Second thing is over leverage, and bankers haven't over leveraged that much yet. So I think we're safe there. And then just a macro level economic issue that could happen, a black swan event that could affect us. But in general, I feel we're pretty safe in LA. That's why we're only investing in LA. And yeah, I'm optimistic on the economy of LA, and especially for multifamily.
What's the latest stat on the lack of housing we have in Los Angeles? How many units are we shy in Southern California?
I always read it, and it's always changing by a little. I don't know exactly, but I know there's like 40, 50,000 in the county new jobs being created every year, and only 8 to 12,000 new units being built. And the rule of thumb is you want to have, for every unit being every 2 jobs, you want 1 unit being built. So we're completely, and for the last 10 years, it hasn't caught up with it.
Are you holding these, or are you flipping them primarily? Or?
Our strategy is to hold. We want to build and hold as many as we can. So we'll sell some, but our strategy is just long-term wealth, just build and hold.
Awesome. Scott, what about you guys? I know you guys are all over the country.
Yeah, so we are nationwide. I would say right now on a nationwide scale, multifamily fundamentals are phenomenal, and they have been for a long time. And to be honest, that scares me. Fundamentals are great. A lot of people renting. Rents are high. Occupancies are high. Lenders are lending, and there's a ton of people wanting to be in it. Now we've kind of had that mentality for the past 3 years, kind of thinking what Steve had thought. We're, around the corner sometime, we expect a correction. And we've probably missed out on some profit as a result. But fundamentals are great, and you just wonder how long can that be? So we've still been buying. We've been selling more than we've been buying. But I think one of the most important things, at least in our eyes, is when we are buying, we're aware of the fact that there can be a correction. And if there is a correction, we want to make sure that we and our investors' capital is protected. So it's, we bought a ton in 2009, 10, 11, 12. And it's just wild seeing how different valuations were back then to now. So one of our biggest concerns is interest rates. If rates go up, how does that affect your cap rate? How does that affect, if you're going to refinance, how does that affect how much you could get? And I mean, in reality, we think real estate is a phenomenal way to get rich slowly, but you just have to be methodical and cautious about it.
Speaking of interest rates, where do you guys see the market, and what's the velocity of deals you're looking at these days?
Yeah, let's talk some facts about that. Q2 2018 nationally was one of the best multifamily quarters we've had historically. 120,000 units nationally were absorbed. National vacancy dropped 50 basis points to below 6%, which is pretty incredible. Year-over-year rent growth, this time 2017 to this time 2018, was still up 3%, which I think surprised a lot of people. Home ownership has gone up a little bit from 2016, but now has curtailed because of interest rates. Little scary thing for me is supply coming online. I think CoStar said there's 4,000 buildings under construction with 680,000 units coming online, which is just a massive number. But nationally, as Scott said, fundamentals are great. I think multifamily is still the safest asset class, especially for a long-term holder. When we look more micro in, say, Los Angeles, let's go back to the point about households. Over this expansion, depending on when you start it, the estimate is about 3.2 million households have been created nationally. If you expect 1 million households to be created in the U.S. annually, we're about 4 million short, just on a national level, if that gives you some perspective. In Los Angeles, it's much more stark, and really throughout California, especially in the Bay Area as well. LA, just more data for you, the highest percentage of renters in any major market in the US. So let that sink in. Of those, 73% make less than $75,000 a year. It's a staggering number. So you think about being starved for housing, and especially workforce housing and affordable housing, Southern California and Los Angeles is the place to be looking at multifamily investment if you're looking for long-term places where people have to live.
A question for you, and actually you guys may have an opinion on this as well. Are you guys currently underwriting to some kind of correction?
We never underwrite to a correction. What we underwrite is stable, right? So what we're looking at is we're stressing the interest rate and we're stressing the cap rate for the exit, because we know at some point cap rates have to go up, and so your loan proceeds are going to be limited. In Southern California, for example, good luck getting 75% LTV. There's just no chance, because you're going to be limited by the debt service, because you can only charge so much for rents in your units, right? And so there's so many governors on loans these days that it's hard to be over leveraged, because so many people are saying, well, we have to be constrained by either the LTV, the debt yield, or the debt service coverage, right? And so it's a way to govern ourselves as lenders, but I wouldn't say we're looking at a correction, but we're saying in the event that there's a downturn or a slowdown in the economy, will this property still underwrite? Will it still cash flow? And will it service the debt service?
Interesting. You made a great point, about California and the supply issues and things like that. And I'm assuming when you're building, you're not building the affordable housing. You're building high-end units that you're not going to be subject to necessarily rent controls and those types of things. So I don't see what concerns me about California multifamily specifically is the fact that like you said, it's 70% plus renters, and if nobody can afford anything, what are they going to do politically, here in California to stop the landlords of multifamilies from jacking rents up and doing, basically creating, what are they going to do to try to increase the supply, which is limiting landlords' rights and potentially reducing it via, rent controls, or trying to put different controls in place and things like that, and making it really draconian on trying to, the tenant landlord laws are already tough enough in California. This is why I invest in Tennessee on these multis, but I don't get the upside potential that you guys get when you're doing a flip on a multi or the increase in equity. But I think it's super important to go through and analyze these from the standpoint of a market correction every time. You don't, at this timing of the cycle, I don't think it's going to go past 2020. I don't think politically they're not going to let the market continue like this through 2020, at least from my standpoint on what they're going to do with monetary policy. If they go through and jack rates up, it's going to make some correction, and then they want to, they were going to use this for political purposes, in my opinion, at least from what may happen. So, we're on this euphoria right now. I don't think it's real either, but how are you guys going about, what strategies, what makes multifamily the asset you guys think to invest in to protect you guys from that downside, and what kind of margins are you trying to look for when you're investing in these things to protect you from that? Obviously, California, you want better margins than a Midwest market that, Post may be investing in and stuff like that, because the cash flow is higher and you can ride outside that downturn. What are you guys underwriting on the cash flow side, and what kind of, I guess, cost to value ratio are you guys trying to hit when you guys are analyzing these things to protect yourself from a potential downside risk?
Objection, compound.
Say it again. These guys over here, so good.
Yeah, well, I'd say one thing we're doing, and it kind of keys off your question about are you underwriting to a correction? We don't necessarily underwrite to a correction, but I think one of the most important things is every deal you look at, it's very easy to look at a deal and be like, listen, we're going to make a ton of money on this deal. We're going to get rent growth. Cap rates are going to go down. It's very easy to see the upside. I think the most important thing or parallel is what's the downside risk, and that you look at that. So from a multifamily standpoint, If occupancies go down, can I still service my debt? What if I don't get the 3% rent growth that I'm modeling every year? So stressing it down and looking at the downside, I think is crucial, a crucial component when you're buying multifamily. And your other question, what was your other question?
Just adding on to that too, it's something that I see a lot from ground up development is everyone thinks they're going to build this thing and they will come. And sometimes they don't come as quickly as you think they will. And so you, as part of that, part of the stress testing that we do is we look at what happens if this thing isn't leased in 6 months like you said it was and it takes you 18, or you have to give rent concessions to make sure that you fill it up. And then when those rent concessions burn off, you're only really getting 9 months of full month's rent. So how does that look to your bottom line? Right? So these are the types of things that we go through on the lending side to make sure, especially in ground up developments, is if you're building this thing, how are we protecting you from making a really bad investment potentially?
Yeah, and I think that downside risk piece, is key to have a lender that does that for you and really looks at it from that angle, because the development risk is gigantic as it is, let alone the market risk. And if you're actually looking at, my second part of the question was, you talked about I talked about the equity piece protection, but also the cash flow protection. Are you guys looking at it saying, hey, if we have a 10% or 15% reduction in rent values, am I still okay? And how are you guys underwriting that piece?
So for all of our deals, we do a regression analysis, so we see how much rents have to go down before we lose money. So we're building a good amount of profit, so rents have to go down substantially. And what we do, we actually look at what happened in 2008, and we see how much rents went down in LA, and then we model it and see how that does on our deals. And we feel very comfortable with our deals. Maybe if there's a downturn, we might not make any money, but as long as it's sweat equity that gets lost, as long as no real equity gets lost, we're happy. So that's what we do. We also don't trend our rents, so we just assume that the rents are going to stay flat. And how does a deal pencil right now? So I don't know if you guys are familiar with cap rates here, but we try for LA, things are trading 4.5 caps. We try to build to it a 6 yield on cost, and we have that good spread there on realistic assumptions. I think that's where people make most of their mistakes in real estate. So I think you guys can attest to this. It's not a bad deal, it's just bad assumptions. If they just think that rents are much higher or vacancies much lower or costs are much higher, that's where the mistakes happen. So that's what we do for our deals.
Yeah, the numbers are everything. So, and if you don't do that right, and it's so hard to comp rents and things like that in different areas, it's not, if you don't know the area or you really got to do an all-out analysis. Steve, when you're advising your clients on how to protect themselves from that downside risk, what are the different things, if you're analyzing a situation that you may recommend to try to reduce risk on, a large apartment owner or a large investor that's got a lot of capital? What are the strategies you're telling them to kind of work on? I know this is a tough question because everybody's different, but
it's a very tough question.
Yeah, I know. So you can handle it, dude. Don't worry. You got it.
In some ways, I'm going to say asked and answered in terms of downward stress testing. If you want to know one of the key indicators that a lot of my clients are looking at right now, I'll answer a different question maybe, which is sort of median household income and average household income and where they fall in with rents. So when they're looking in these markets, they're looking at investing, that's one of the key indicators for them. So it's something that's sort of global in every market that you go into, whether it's the LA market or it's someone here was investing in Alabama, Huntsville, I think it was, somewhere. So that's one of the things that we look at is we look at median household incomes and how far down might median household incomes fall and where are we going to be if that happens.
So you can see what their affordability is and how
exactly
good or
the affordability
bad that
index,
is in that area.
exactly.
Okay, cool. And so a lot of you guys, you guys invest in different markets and deal with different stuff here. Steve, are a lot of your clients hold a lot of stuff in California, or do they hold it all over the world or all over the
Almost
nation?
everything that I deal with is in the Southern California market, Arizona, a little bit in Colorado, a little bit in Texas.
And are they seeing any frothiness of the market currently, or things going on here?
So I think that they anticipate that there are going to be things going on here, but I think, again, in the Southern California market, in multifamily, I guess you just have to break it down. Are we talking like Class A, Class B, or Class C? In the Class A market, no, I don't think we're seeing much in the way of price reductions. Class B, maybe B minus, the C plus range, we've seen maybe a drop, 50 basis points maybe in pricing. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, it's just trying to get a general gauge of what's happening in the overall market and in these markets that you're seeing. So that's great information. Scott, you deal with a lot of out-of-state stuff as well, right? So what are you seeing in some of these different markets around the country for cash flow and stability and rental increases or decreases right now?
Sure, yeah. So it's crazy hearing that you're trying to sell deals at a 4.5 cap, because I've been looking at 5-6 years ago when we were buying a ton of deals in Dallas, we were buying Class B product for 7 caps. Now, those cap rates, there are many instances when I talk to the broker and they're saying sub 5. So you're talking about an older, ugly deal in Dallas compared to a brand new deal in LA and comparable cap rates, and that blows my mind. So that's why, real estate is deal specific, market specific. We look at demographics, job growth, population growth, and what's the supply of new construction coming on. That's how we look at a market, and that's that's how we look at the different markets outside of California. We love affordable housing, like blue collar affordable housing, housing with rent restrictions. If there's a downturn, those will still stay full, so that we love that. But there's a lot of, because multifamily has become so popular, a lot of those secondary markets, you're seeing the same pricing or similar returns that you would expect in California, and usually the risk doesn't warrant that for those markets.
I'm still selling 7 caps in Tennessee for full rehab, which market previously was 9, and so it's just everything's getting squeezed. But Andrew, on the lending piece, what are you seeing right now with regard to rates, the types of financing that's available with regard to the terms that are out there? And obviously this is different for $1 million properties versus $20 million properties. And what are you seeing in the differences? Because we had these kind of conversations about these types of asset classes and the main differences between the huge lenders and the little ones. And what are you seeing as far as rates, terms, and that kind of stuff, assuming DTI works, debt to income works, and that kind of thing?
So if you guys don't know me, I'm a data guy, so let's talk more data. Capital markets year over year for first half 2018 was actually stronger than 2017 in multifamily, which is interesting because 2017 was the largest year in capital markets ever in the history of the U.S. That was really fueled by a really strong second half last year. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. On multifamily, we're seeing a lot more players. There's a lot more capital getting into the space. So you're always going to have your Fannie and Freddie and HUDs, right, putting out X amount. They keep on increasing their caps, so that keeps going up. But what we're seeing is we're seeing a lot more private equity. We're seeing a lot more private debt funds coming in, especially in the value add rehab space, because that's where you can get some yield, right? It's floating rate. It's it's great for the lender if rates go up because they get more yield. It's riskier for the borrower, but they're getting in there. They know it's a short-term deal, so they'll get paid off, and then they can re-put that money back out at a higher rate later. And so it's getting really, really competitive in that space. So we're talking, LIBOR in the 200 spreads, right? So LIBOR plus 250 at the very top end.
Which puts rates where? Where does that?
1 month LIBORs tick over 2 today, so call it 450 all in, and that's going 80% of cost and funding your entire renovation on a multifamily.
Wow. That's awesome. What kind of size loan is that?
You see debt funds, they'll say 10 million and up on the debt piece itself. But they'll go to 7.5 and 5 in some cases. But I mean, there are players that play in the smaller ones, but it usually comes at a premium, right? So instead of seeing LIBOR 250 or LIBOR 325, which is just super tight pricing, you might see LIBOR 395, LIBOR 450, right? So you'll pay a premium to do it, but there's folks out there doing it on the smaller one, yeah. I mean, on the perm debt stuff, right? So if you're looking for 10-year fixed rate. If it's so Fannie and Freddie price based on debt service coverage, right? So if you're at a 125 coverage, which is the lowest they'll let you be, so it's the most aggressive loan you can get through Fannie or Freddie. I'm going to guess, ballpark today on a 30-year AM, you're at 460 to 490, something like that. And if you scale it down, you ratchet the leverage down, and you're at maybe a 155 debt service cover, you're probably 40 bips inside of that. So that's, 420 to 90, 450, something like that.
Does everybody know what debt service coverage
I was going to say, why don't you talk about debt service coverage, but use English words.
Sure, okay. Really easy. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, okay. All right, very, very, okay. I'll try and be as...
Whiteboard.
Yeah, exactly. It's easier that way.
Yeah, whiteboard, crayon language.
All right, let's break it down with a quick example. If you buy a 5-unit apartment building that pays $100,000 in total gross rents, you then pay the expenses, and let's call it $40,000 a year. You're left with $60,000 in net operating income. That's your income before you pay your debt service on your loan. Okay. What a lender will do is they'll cap you. So they'll take a cap rate, which is just an arbitrary percentage rate, and let's call it 4.5 in LA. Let's call it 5 because I might be able to do that in my head. So 5% on what, 60,000?
We'll say 5. We'll just assume it's
so that's a $3 million property, right? So everyone's going, okay, great. I can borrow 75% of that $3 million, right? Wrong. What the lender's going to do is they're actually going to stress it to $1.25 for every dollar of NOI that you have.
So if you guys have basically $1 million in debt of debt payments on an annual basis, and or if you have $100,000 of debt payments on an annual basis and $150,000 of revenue, you have 150% debt service coverage ratio. Does that make sense? Okay. Cool. Awesome.
I can add a little because we have a lot of projects under construction. I think we have 12 projects under construction and 4 in pre-development. So we get a lot of construction loans, and then once they're done, we get a lot of perm loans. So for local guys, construction interest rates or bridge loans that I'm seeing are between 5.5% to 6% rates, and they'll usually go up to 70% loan to cost of your total cost they'll lend you. But then on the refi, once you're getting out of the construction loan and putting a perm loan, we're seeing rates in the 4.5%, but that's locations in multifamily for LA. And they'll go 55, 60% loan to value because of the debt service coverage ratio.
Yeah, and one other thing I'd say about financing right now, and I don't have any data to back this up. I wish I did. I'll probably have it by the end of the year, though. I know, right? But it just feels like there's more interest-only permanent loans. So typically when you're doing a ground-up construction or a renovation bridge, that's going to be interest-only payments, right? Because you need as much cash flow as you can, especially as you're turning units and you're trying to project cash flow. When you do the permanent, that's when you get your amortization typically, right? And you get a 30-year or a 25-year AM, so you're paying down principal with each debt payment. But what I'm feeling is in this market, because yields have been compressed so much by cap rates and rates have now gone up, that more people are getting 10-year full-term interest only for their perm, right? So they're not paying down any principal, and so what they're really banking on is appreciation and rent growth and, hopefully some cap rate compression. But I think we all agree that cap rates have to go up. So one of those things has to give, which is kind of interesting to see from our perspective.
Those will be deals to buy 10 years from now when they start not paying their debt anymore, right? So, Steve, for your clients, are they buying right now or are they selling?
They're buying right now.
What does a good deal look like these days?
Oh, man, that's a tough question.
We gave you the questions like an hour before.
What is a good? I don't know. What does a good deal look like for them?
So, part of your service is you advise them on different deals they look at. When you look at a deal, something they're excited about, what are some of the components of a deal right now that you say, yeah, that looks like a good deal? What are you looking for?
Maybe I can answer this. Maybe I can tell you what they're looking for. Is that more in line with the question? So I can tell you what they're looking for. They're looking for a value add. They're looking for a Class B. Most of my clients are looking at Class B. With a value add. They want to pick up a property, say, somewhere in North Torrance, Mid Torrance, $200,000 a door. They want to put 25 to 50 into it a door. They want to raise rents, and they want to hold long term. That's really what they're looking for. That's what it seems like all of my clients are looking for long term right now.
Paul, I mean, where do you guys, when you're still buying and building, are you buying raw land? Are you repurposing land? Like, what do you guys look for right now for a good deal?
That's another thing I'll add, the benefits of California. There's no raw land. So you go to other markets, you go to Nevada, there's just a bunch of land that people can develop in. Here, there's really no raw land. So what we look for is just properties that are not its highest and best use, and we just knock them down, and then we build up. And then what a good deal looks for us is we try to either build to a 6 yield on cost, or just in simple numbers, we try to build to $300,000 a unit when they're going to appraise for $450,000 to $500,000 a unit. So that's our spread right there.
65%, something like that, like cost to value, basically, in that range.
Exactly.
So you can refinance and...
Yeah, refinance, return the equity, do it again.
Scott, what about you guys?
You got a question? Yeah, well, right there, since you're a developer, right? So, like, let's say you look at a C zoning and you can build, let's just say, 20 units. How much are you going to pay per door before development?
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, so the question is, if I buy a commercial site in LA, we can build multifamily on a commercial site, 20 units, how much per buildable door do I want to buy the land for? So that answer, there's a lot of answers to that question, because it depends, are we going subterranean, which increases the cost a lot, or what size are the units? So sometimes we're building micro units, sometimes we're building larger 2-bedroom units. So, and that depends what rents we're going to get. So obviously, to answer your question, from $50,000 to $100,000 is what we look for when we buy land. It just depends on the size of the units and the cost of the construction.
But real quick, what's the average size of your deals? How many units are you building on average?
Average 20. So 20 units, yeah.
Okay.
Just adding to that question, though, so when we look at it, we're backing into that number, right? Because what it comes down to is, what's my cost to build? Because land plus cost to build, then I know, and plus the rents that I'm going to get, now I know what my return is, right? So I can back into that number by saying I can build for $400 a foot, and if I know I'm building 20 units at 1,000 square feet per unit, right, now I know exactly how much it's going to cost me hard costs, and I can say I can afford to pay $60,000 a door, but I can't pay any more than that, or else it just doesn't work based on my yield on the back end. Does that make sense?
Scott?
I feel that the bigger deals just don't make sense. I think these developers are just doing it for fees. They're basically for fee developers, and I think these smaller deals, I'm competing with mom and pop developers, and there's not that much capital. Like, a lot of capital guys, they want to put $5-10 million checks out at least. So dealing with these smaller deals, I think our margins are better because there's just less competition.
But by doing 20 units, you're requiring a full-time on-site property manager. If you did 15, make bigger units, might get more rent, and your expenses are going to be lower.
True, on the property management side, but that's such a small piece of the value we create. We create the value in the development. So each deal makes us a good amount of money. We save a little bit on the on-site property manager guy. It justifies it.
Scott, what about you guys? I mean, what you're looking at right now, what's a good deal look like in your world?
So we're trying to get returns. The biggest metric we use today is what's the cash on cash we're going to get today. You can put all your projections, try and figure out what the future is going to be. Only Steve knows that. So we're looking to get an 8%.
I'll be right one of these days. I keep saying the same thing eventually is going to happen. And then I'll be back on the financial panel and not hanging out with you guys.
I meant that as a compliment. We try to get an 8% return on if you're investing $100.
Cash on cash, or
cash on cash? Yeah. So if you're investing $100, you're getting an 8% or an $8 dividend distribution each year. So that's after it's getting leveraged up with a loan. So we, right now we're doing lower leverage loans, and we're using interest only to help get those returns. And that's kind of just where the market is because it's competitive.
Just going back to Jeff's question, you can't tell a developer to build 15 when he's zoned for 20. It doesn't work.
Only the local community can do that.
That's right. Yeah, only neighborhood council gets a say in that. I want to answer this two ways because I think that's a great answer. Is when you're looking for cash on cash return, you're looking for whatever your hurdle is, but your hurdle may be different, right? So, and it depends on the type of investment. We have clients that are ground up developers, and you know what? There is zero cash flow day one because they're putting all their money into this, and 3 years from now, that's when they get their cash flow. So they are either IRR or multiple driven, meaning that when they put in $100,000, or typically we're dealing with more institutional equity folks that are writing the $5 and $10 million checks, but when they're putting in $10 million, they want to see twice that, so $10 million in profit by the end of the project, right? 3 to 5 or 7 years, depending on how long that hold is, right? Or they're looking to hit an annual IRR, a total IRR, and it's typically mid-teens, right? I mean, somewhere between 16 to 18 is where you're going to get people's attention in big private equity firms that are writing big checks. But if you're looking for cash flow, absolutely, right? Then you have a day one immediate cash flow, or potentially you're doing a value add, so you have some cash flow going day one, but you know you're going to get your pop or your ongoing pop as you increase rents over the life of the deal. So,
Scott, this one's for you. So let's talk about the process of doing due diligence and how multifamily is different than single family. I think you're probably the most likely comparison because you're buying something more like a fix and flip investor. So give them some information on what it looks like when you're doing due diligence on your projects and what you may do that's different than a single family project.
Sure. When I buy a single family home, first question is to my wife. On the multifamily front, from a due diligence standpoint, there's a lot of really important things. I think one of the most important things when you're doing this is have a good attorney. Have a good attorney that you trust, because you're going to be going through loan documents. And if you are ever buying real estate, you want to make sure you know what those loan documents say. So having a good attorney, reviewing title, reviewing survey, so knowing what you're actually buying and legally getting it. So from the legal standpoint. From the due diligence standpoint, we're going out and we're having our construction engineer look at the property, because we need to know, how much money we need to spend on this property to either get the improvements we want or to make sure it doesn't fall down. You're looking at operating statements and seeing how has the property done, and that's actually one of the big factors we use in trying to project what it's going to be. So when we're analyzing a deal, we look at how it's done historically, how the market has done historically, and I think that's one of the biggest things, is looking at the immediate market, how your property's doing and how the properties around there are doing. And that can kind of give you an idea of, if you're doing a value add, which is a very popular investment thesis, what can you push the rents to? So you need to be knocking on doors, calling the competitive properties, finding out what their occupancy is, finding out what their rents are. And then, there's so much I could talk about in due diligence, and it's boring.
I can add to some of that. Basically, when you look at a house, you're buying it for $200,000. You're going to put $30,000 into it, and it's going to be worth $250,000. So you have your spread there. In apartments, it's similar. You just break it down on an apartment unit, but the value is not coming from. The value is coming from your income. So you got to really understand the income on what's currently rented. So if you have a unit that's rented for $900, you put $20,000-$30,000 into it, and now you're getting $1,400. It's going to be worth it. You're going to create enough value, and then across 20 units, now you're making a good pop. So like the 80-20 rule is really understand the rents and the cap rates in that market, in that specific market, and then you can do great, and then understand the rent control laws too as well.
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand, those rents are pretty much everything, right? I mean, your rents and understanding operational efficiencies in a specific market. And keep in mind, a lot of people come up with, there's a lot of quick and dirty ways of analyzing properties really fast by saying, hey, what's my market rents? What kind of rehab do I think I need per unit, and what are my operational costs that I know that I can improve through experience? And so through my own experience of doing a deal, a lot of these guys up here over time have gotten tons of that. I know exactly what the cost to renovate a 2-bedroom unit is, or build a 2-bedroom unit, or whatever it is, and you can kind of extrapolate that data and do a quick and dirty approach and say, rents are going to be up here, here's what my estimated all-in cost is, minus 35%, 40% expense ratio, depending on what your rents are. That expense ratio changes substantially depending if you have $1,000 rents or lower, or $800 or $2,000 rents. Your expense ratio is going to be adjusted because on the lower units, on the lower price point dollar figure rental units, the expenses really still can cost very similar, and so you have 40-50% expense ratios in a lot of cases and so it's very market specific. I think it's important to understand that aspect of the due diligence piece. When you guys, Steve, I'll ask you this from when you're looking at some of these multifamilies. What are some of the things you see to try to help clients like cut expenses and look at ways to improve the cash flow? Because a lot of mom and pop operators, they're just great. I got my cash flow. I'm not really focused. They think they have a good manager and they don't, or and they don't necessarily fully understand how to operate this efficiently. How do you help them with some of those aspects and showing them where they're losing money?
Well, I think one of the most important things you hit on is you have to understand the expenses. And when you go in to buy a property, you need to really look very closely at the expenses, because I'll tell you one thing, every expense report I've ever seen from a broker is not correct, right? Present company accepted, of course. So I think that's one of the first places that you can go wrong, is not fully understanding the expenses that are associated with a piece of property. In terms of managing the expenses, what I typically will advise them is utilizing professional property managers. That's one of the things that we always do. But then managing the managers, that's very important, because no one's going to watch the property like you're going to watch the property. No one is invested in the property like you are. So it's very important that you walk the property on a regular basis. And so one of the things that we do, building family offices, we encourage the senior generation to take the younger generation to walk the property, inspect the property, understand what's going on. Look for those places where they can maybe save a little money, make sure that things are getting taken care of. What I'm really focused on in my practice is building the desire to continue or perpetuate the wealth. And so one of those things is getting the kids involved. The younger you get them involved, the better off that they are. And walking the property is one of the biggest ones. And it's the only way you're really going to understand what the expenses are associated with the piece of property.
That's great information. I think you're right on the money with all of that stuff. So it's really key understanding those expenses and understanding and having that oversight of the property management. Like literally, you're going to be 10 times more efficient just having one person designated to manage the managers for you and paying them a small fee. I was horrible at it in the beginning, when just learning and going, I'm flipping houses, I don't have time to look at these statements every single month and find every efficiency, but it's extremely important to do that. So, Andrew, when you're looking at these expenses from a lender's standpoint, what do you think is normal? Like, how do you gauge that normalcy? Because you get the broker statements like he's saying, and you're like, that's wrong, that's not real. They try to put in all these fake numbers, and then you're trying to underwrite it based on the last 12 months, and everything's different. Like, how do you go through that underwriting on the expense side and find out what's real?
Yeah, couple different points I think I should hit on quickly. So multifamily diligence, probably 5 main items that you're going to A, be required to do, and B, you're going to want to have when you're buying a multifamily property. Unless you're going hard money, then they probably won't require it. The appraisal, your phase 1 environmental, your property condition report, your engineering report, your survey or your zoning letter to make sure what's there can be built there. And then in California, most likely a PML, which is your probable maximum loss, which says, what is the probability this building's falling down when we have our next earthquake? Those items sometimes will dictate your financing. Like in the case of the appraisal, both on a single family or a multifamily, if your value comes in low, your lender's not going to say it's still worth what you thought it was worth or what your purchase price is. They're going to go off what the appraisal says. If the environmental comes in with remediation that's required because there was a spill there, you're going to have to pony up the dough to fix that and to clean it up. If your engineer comes in and says you need a new roof, guess what? We'll fund the loan, but you're paying for a new roof day one with some of those loan proceeds, because those are just items that will be dictated. From an ongoing expense piece, so we're in a pretty unique position as a lender. We service all of our multifamily loans. So we have a $75 billion portfolio of existing loans on our books. And so we mine that data, hence why I have so much information at my fingertips. But we can go through, and if you're buying a place in Indianapolis, we can tell you that we have 12 other assets there, and that typically their payroll and their management are paying X, and their utilities, they're paying Y. And this one, for some reason, they're getting ripped off, or they're way under market, and they're going to be corrected. And so we have access to go through and actually guide our client to say, hey, listen, this is a good deal for these reasons, or hey, we really need to look into this because something's going on and there's a story here. The other thing I can tell you just from a portfolio-wide perspective is that all expenses go up over time, just cost of living and inflation. But the biggest jump we've seen in recent years is real estate taxes. Because when you buy, it's reassessed. And so you have to gauge for that jump, because that's going to be, especially if it hasn't traded in a long time, you're now going to have to underwrite to that and make sure going forward, you're accounting for that bump in taxes.
Insurance is actually having some major changes and things like that too right now with all the changes in weather. Some of my larger investors and insurance brokers are talking to me about some of the, everything is changing. Flood maps are changing constantly. There's lots of things happening. So pay attention to that stuff about where you're buying. Could you even be in a future flood zone? Because if you're talking flood zone insurance, you're through the roof on insurance. I mean, it's crazy. So, that being said, thanks for the answers on the questions, on the expenses and things like that. I'm going to come back to you, Scott, in a second. But Paul, when you're underwriting some of this stuff, when you're looking at what your projected expenses are on a multifamily that you're building, can you touch on some of the specific expenses on how you guys analyze, hey, this is how much I think we'll have to pay in utilities on a per unit, or electricity or water, or I don't know what else, property taxes, insurance. How do you gauge these things when you're running through this initially?
So I actually heard another developer say this. It's called the swag, a sophisticated wild ass guess. but actually, we now have many properties that we operate ourselves, so we know exactly what our expenses are. And one of the benefits of developing, as you said, by property taxes, is our property taxes are based off our costs, not the value. So I always have to fight with lenders once they're appraising their property and say, look, my property taxes are going to be way lower than what you think it is, appraiser, because they go off our costs, not the value. So.
Okay, cool. And so when you, for example, if you're, question out here? Yes.
So I have a question in regards to how you know what type of building you're going to be building, because our neighborhoods are changing. So is it going to be an A, B, or C building? And also how you're budgeting percentage for architecture and design for each type of project.
Okay. We stick to areas where we know we can get good rents to justify our construction costs. So most of the buildings, we try to be around $400 to $600 cheaper than Class A amenity buildings, because we think there's an opportunity there, and it's less risky because everyone's building for the Class A. So we go to those neighborhoods. We don't go to neighborhoods where we're not getting such high rents because it won't justify our construction costs. And then as for percentage, as we call it soft costs, like architect, engineer, permits, insurance. So that's usually around, we underwrite in a price per square foot. So let's say on a price per square foot, that's around $30 a square foot for us in our buildings.
What's your hard cost bill?
Our hard cost ranges from $200 to $300 a foot. Just depends on the design of the building that we're building for right now.
Cool. I'll just answer that question sort of nationally speaking, what's being built. And I think that's part of what we do in analyzing different, what makes a good deal is looking at the market. Scott referenced it. What's the supply coming online, and what are other people building in that market? And so, again, more data for you. So if you got your pens out, this is a good one. I think I said 73% of all LA renters earn less than $75,000 a year. I want to say nationally it's like 63%, right? So it's still a really big number. Yet all these new construction that are coming online are all Class A. You see these beautiful advertisements for it on Instagram now and all this stuff, and they're asking these top dollar rents. They're really only targeting like 20% of the renter pool, right? Because if you think about if you're renting correctly, you should be allocating no more than 35% of your annual income towards your housing cost. And so what that tells me is there's a lot of supply for really nice product coming online, and people are splurging to spend it, along with their iPhones and other things, so they're not doing a great job of budgeting. But that tells me that there's going to be potentially a really nice niche for getting into B properties, workforce housing, maybe something that's not class AA on Main Street in Santa Monica, but it's in Palms, and it's a really nice property, and you can get decent rents.
The biggest challenge right now is construction costs going through the roof, and so it makes sense to build the Class A because you're going to get your rents and your dollar figures and all that stuff until 3D printing comes in line and we can build 800 square feet units for $4,000, consistently, which I really think is probably going to be on the horizon very quickly here. There's a company in Texas that's actually doing it for $4,000 with the roof and everything inside is $10,000 for an 800 square foot house. So things are going to change very quickly. It's really interesting what's happening right now. So as tech changes, it's going to be madness.
One thing that we always say, and listen, there is an affordable housing crisis specifically in California. I think we all know it, but we're all capitalists too, right? And I consider myself a compassionate person. But I'll ask Paul, what does it cost for you to build a Class A unbelievable place, and what does it cost for you to build an affordable place?
Almost the same. So basically, it's all commodities, right? Wood's a commodity, concrete's a commodity, labor's a commodity. And 80% of your cost are those, and then the 20% are the finishes at the end. So if you can put a little nice finisher and get way higher rent, that's why everyone's building the Class A.
So listen, if I'm a developer, I'm building Class A stuff because I realize that people need places to live, but I'd rather get the people and build a nicer place than the place across the street because I'm going to get those people paying top dollar rents. It's going to cost me the same thing. And you're damn right, I'm building 20 units, not 15.
and on top of that, you also have issues, you have rent control issues that you're avoiding by going to higher rents. And this is the problem with rent control, is that the true economic impact is that actually people stop investing in those types of things, and it creates opportunity where the slumlords are like, why am I going to fix it? I can't raise rents. So then the newer guys come in, buy the whole building, demolish it or rehab it like crazy and go high end, and you have no more lower end units. And so this is a big challenge in a lot of cities in different ways with rent control, and they're not understanding the economics of it as well. So we had some questions. Where are we at? Right here? Then we'll come back here.
It's a question for all of you. It's about the container apartments, container ships that they convert. Have you come across it?
Have you done container construction or investments yet, guys?
I have a client in Park City, Utah that's building them, and they're doing it for workforce housing because it's seasonal, right? So folks can come in, they can use it, they'd rent it, and then they'd go, and it doesn't really matter because it doesn't, unless you're using it, it doesn't really put off an environmental footprint. The difficult part is financing at this point. Fannie and Freddie do not recognize them as units yet. And so until that happens, I don't think you'll see it on a mass scale because you're going to have to self-fund or, maybe find private money and pay that. But I don't think anyone's going to do that because you're not going to get the yield and the rents on the back end. So I think until Fannie and Freddie recognize it as this is a dwelling unit with its own individual bathroom and either kitchen for it or shared kitchen, then it's not going to get mass produced.
If you're saying, I get the economics behind why it makes more sense to build Class A property. However, a lot of economics, you build too much Class A, the rents are going to have to come down. You have too much supply, not enough demand. And so do those Class A units that you built become Class B because it's a lower rent, or eventually do you just say it just starts to make more financial sense to build those Class B to begin with because that's where the market is and because there's too much supply of Class A?
we don't see it that way. We just see it as, let's just try to get the top dollar in rent as we can because the cost is almost going to be the same. I don't have much for you on that one.
What about you guys? You guys is most of your stuff Class B?
Most of our stuff is Class B affordable. To answer your question in terms of would you build Class A or Class B, if you're in a fortunate enough position where you can build a Class A and don't have too much leverage, okay? So where you're not forced to hit a certain rent to make your rent payment, let's say the market turns, you can reduce your rent and people are still going to want to rent in your building as opposed to Class B. But yeah, we buy mostly Class B stuff, affordable, ton of demand for that. We're not building it, so we're not paying the costs and getting a loan where we have to hit specifically high rents. We have to hit lower rents to cover our debt service and get our yield. So we love affordable housing and Class B workforce housing.
Question over here.
Are you guys using accelerated depreciation at all possible? Obviously in Illinois, I'm assuming you are.
Yes.
Especially now with the new tax plans and things like that, right, Steve? Can you explain the new rules with regard to the 5-year and 15-year property?
No.
Nobody can.
No, I can't.
General
I can't
overview. Hopefully, that's right. Or I can, but
why don't you go for that one? I'm gonna punt on that one.
He's going to tell me I'm wrong in like 15 ways right now. Watch. So basically, you can go through and now start to, the 5-year and 15-year property, you can start to write off in the year of service. In a lot of cases with accelerated depreciation, I'm actually planning on doing that with a bunch of properties near year end or in the next quarter to help counterbalance income issues and things like that. Plus you get the 20% flow through deduction now as well in a lot of cases. So I think there's some strategies you should be talking to Steve about that doesn't want to talk about right now. And so
I'll just be honest, I think a lot of people don't fully understand them at this point in time. They came about in January of 2018. We haven't actually prepared any returns based on them. So until we flush them through returns, I think it's a little hard to sort of predict how they're all going to work.
So get away with everything you can right now. And I will not do your taxes since we're online right now. So
Can I just touch on going back to the Class A, Class B, and all that? I mean, this is my favorite answer because it applies to everything, but it really depends. And in my opinion, I think supply in certain markets is definitely going to be an issue, right? You have markets like Nashville that has 10% of all supply in the city, in the metro, under construction right now, and another 20% of that was delivered in 2015. Now it's absorbed that first 20% pretty well, but you have another glut of supply coming online. I think you're going to see rents level off and maybe even potentially see rents because of concessions actually go down year over year for the first time in almost 10 years, right? But in LA, right, it totally depends. You look at downtown LA, there is more construction in LA than there has been in the last century, period, for multifamily. And yet they're even absorbing these super high-end, modern high-rises in downtown LA much quicker than the national average typically does on Class A, right? So we're so starved for housing that people are willing to even pay extra and top dollar to do it. Now, do I think that's going to continue? No. I think there's going to be supply issues. So I think in really good times and in this expansion, we've seen Class A explode. We did not have this much. There's probably enough Class A to last us for the next 40 years being built right now. But I think from my perspective, the reason the attractive C-, B- properties, workforce housing, are so good is because when a market does turn and there's a recession and you can get a place that's $800, $1,000 less in rent and it's still a roof over your head and it's still pretty nice, it's not a tin can in Yakima, it's a good place and it holds its value and you can rent it, good times and bad times.
Brett, do you have a follow-up? Yeah.
Not a follow-up. I've been waiting for it to come up, and I'm just going to bring it up, and that's cost of pockets. Yeah. Especially the developer here. Are you guys? You already said that you don't do forecasts and projections. You're just leveling off. So as far as you're concerned, on your numbers, you're fine. I'm sure you're hoping that the rent control doesn't come into play.
So just as an explanation, there's a potential, actually the bill's going to be on the ballot in November to eliminate something called Costa-Hawkins, which basically it won't create rent control in California, but it opens the door for every community in California to implement more stringent rent control. I'm guessing this affects a lot of your clients quite a bit. The units they have are probably very much subject to potential rent control, right?
So it's something we're watching. It's something we're concerned about. It's not necessarily stopping them from investing in the California markets at this point in time. Right, so just so everybody knows, properties 1978 and older can be subject to rent control. After 1978, not subject to rent control. This might change that.
I was actually having a conversation with my buddy about that today, who does a ton of value add, and I just told him, like, I would hold right now just to see what happens on future investments. I'd be concerned if I'm a value add guy. For us, I was telling him, I really don't care, because actually if this does pass and everything gets rent control, then the higher end, the new construction, I think is only going to go up higher in price. So it might not affect us. It might even actually be better for us, even though I completely disagree with the economics part of it politically. But I think if you're a value add player, I'd sit on the sidelines a little bit.
I also heard an interesting point of view on the rent control piece, where if it gets enacted at the top of the market, which is typically when they want to try to enact it because the rents are going crazy, then it may not affect you very much, because they usually put a percentage increase in there. If it's like, I don't know if it'll be 4 or what it'll be, but it may not keep up with inflation if we're at the top and then have a correction and things like that. It'll be a while before that actually starts to take effect. It was just an interesting point on rent control, where it may not be as dangerous as you may think with certain asset classes.
For now. Question two?
For now.
Yeah.
The same thing. Yes, if you are already collecting the market rent, 3 or 4%, you're okay. But is the vacancy decontrolled? Correct. Where if the tenants moved out, you cannot charge the market rent. So whatever the tenant is paying $800, the market rent is $2,400, so you can only charge $800.
Which I think, to Steve's point, just because if it does pass, you don't know what local communities are going to do. I think everyone's just kind of in a wait and hold. And I know I have some clients that have actually stopped acquiring because they just want to know what's going to happen. They may be willing to come back in, but waiting at this point another 3 months, it doesn't. It just makes prudent sense. Scott, is that rent control? Is that something that you guys deal with in some of your markets at all, or?
Yeah, so actually a large percentage of our properties that we buy are all rent controlled because we buy a lot of affordable housing, so they have rent restrictions in place, and each year they're allowed to go up by how much the area median income has gone up. So for us, it's nothing new on those properties, and you just have to be really conservative in what you think those what those rent increases will be. Now, on the flip side, when we see a property that's rent controlled, so they don't rent control every unit differently. They rent control every single unit in the building at one rent. So let's say it's all one bedrooms and they're all rent controlled at $800. We love finding one of those property where the rent's there, people are paying $600, and we're going, this is a affordable property. The market rent is $1,000. The maximum rent you can charge here is $800. They should be getting $800 on every deal. So it's very different from what's here in California, but you just you have to be a little conservative in your assumptions.
We mentioned before about managing your property managers. How do you guys do that? Because everything you do is out of state. How do you manage your managers for your units? So how many units are you guys managing right now?
Over 10,000, a little over 10,000. So the asset management is crucial. You have your property management team and a property manager. That property manager has a very big impact on how well your investment goes. So we dedicate one person in our company. Each property has an asset manager that's an employee of our organization to make sure that they are reviewing the expenses. They are reviewing the rents. They're making sure the property is as occupied as all the other properties in the area. Make sure the property's not falling apart, being very proactive about preventative maintenance. So we have a dedicated asset management team. Now, if you're smaller, you still want to make sure that you are overlooking your property. And when you're a smaller company growing, that's one of the most important things is you're putting in your sweat equity to make sure that those property managers are doing right and you're maximizing your investment. But having a dedicated asset management team focusing on that's how we do it.
Big Brother's always watching. We have asset managers as well. So everything that we service, we go out and we visit almost annually. And so we want to make sure that our clients are being diligent and they are maintaining their properties and they are not neglecting them and they're using their reserves wisely. And when capital expenditures come up, that things are getting, problems are getting solved and you're not in default of your loan documents. So read your loan documents, but also know that you may be subject to lenders' asset management as well.
Do you share those reports with your borrowers?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an ongoing discussion. And if there's an issue, it's a conversation. That's the beauty of sort of knowing who you work with and knowing your lender and having that relationship with them. Because in other parts of commercial real estate finance, there are people that are dedicated servicers for loans. And when something goes wrong, you don't know them. You're calling up an 800 number in the Midwest, and they are not nice people, and you don't want to deal with them.
Could I just add one thing? If you're looking at getting into multifamily investing, it's like a business. You're going to be busy. You can't buy this as a passive investment. It's going to require boots on the ground every single day if you want to be successful at it.
Yep. Let's go here, and then I'll go here, and then here. Yeah.
So on the smaller side, just looking at deals in rent control areas, and also doing the brokeraging on it, how would you suggest these mom and pop real estate investors were buying out tenants in rent control areas? You ever found any successful techniques or methods?
You guys might deal with that, huh? Because you're having to buy things out. You want to go repeat the question too, so everyone can hear it.
The question is, how do we get rid of the tenants before we knock down the building? We say we're going to come remodel the building with a bulldozer, so you guys... No, we're friendly and we're nice, and we just do cash for keys and try to buy them out and try to do this during escrow, so we know the amount that we should plug into our spreadsheet on basically our land costs. But yeah, cash for keys. I think renters are pretty savvy right now what they should get. And you actually, now it's law in the city, you have to disclose what they're entitled to get. So you just go in there and you say, hey, you need to get this, and you do it in their language, their native language that they speak, and you have them sign, and you come up with a contract, and you do it. Yep. And then one last thing, going back to Coastal Hawkins, if I had rent control buildings in LA, I would, on new renewals, I would start separating the parking. So, because I don't think they can control it and monitor the parking.
Utilities, maybe. Separating things like that, like utilities and parking.
Interesting.
Water.
Yeah. Brett.
Yeah, my question is for Steve and Scott primarily, and that is how do you decide when you sell an asset? When you have a property you bought, it's outperformed your expectations, values are up, you still got 5 years left on a really low interest rate. How do you decide when you sell the property?
So one great thing about real estate is just the tax advantage. I would say in that scenario, if we're debating this on a number of deals right now that we bought not too long ago, and we're getting broker opinion of values, and they're coming back, they're exceeding what we thought we were going to sell it for sooner than we thought we would have had to sell, and we're going, okay, I mean, this is great. This is what we underwrote to. So we've got two options. You sell it, or the other option is you try to responsibly refinance it. Okay, so look at your downside, put on some debt. Perfect scenario, you can take out all of your equity, tax-free. You're getting a loan, so that's a liability. You have to pay that back, but you get all that cash, and you still own the asset. But I mean, in real estate, you're trying to build long-term wealth, hold assets for long-term, get recurring checks coming in. So it kind of depends what your structure is. If it's just you, or if it's an investor. One of the other most important things is, what are you going to do with that money? What's the cash that you're getting from that property now? What's the risk with it? And if you sell it, pay taxes on it, or 1031 it, what can you make in the market right now? It's kind of our analysis.
Yeah, so Scott actually picked up on what I was going to bring up is what are you going to go into, right? Every single sale I've been involved with recently, the seller's been very unhappy because they couldn't find something they wanted to go into. So now they're sitting on cash on the sidelines. It's not that they're looking to deploy and they can't find what they had.
It's one of the things, like whenever you raise capital for investors, the first thing they want to know is when are they going to get their money back? And then you give it back to them, they're like, well, what am I supposed to do with it? Like, right? So it's a dilemma right now.
We've advised clients at certain times to actually pay the taxes because the deals they were looking at just didn't have enough yield and it just didn't make any sense. So it was actually more beneficial for them to pay the taxes than it was to just buy a deal and put their money back to work.
Speaking of that, go ahead.
But if someone's giving you an offer that you think is unreasonable in a good way, hard to turn that down.
It's
I'll tell you, the other time we sell is when somebody dies. Step up in basis. Very important.
Nice.
That's also a good way for instead of cash for keys.
Yeah. you know. Speaking of the whole repositioning and not having another asset to buy, how are you guys going about finding these deals, or how are your clients finding them? How are you guys finding the deals that you're buying now? Or are you even, I mean, you're still doing development, but are you even buying right now, Scott, on your stuff? And, I guess we could start with Steve here.
So, I guess part of the issue is that I'm a lawyer and I represent clients, and can I really go into that? But because I'm pretty sure some of my clients are going to watch the video. They might be on Facebook. How many people are on Facebook right now? Do we know? Okay. Well, anyway.
5.
Okay. So they're all on Facebook watching me divulge their secrets. How are we finding the deals? Pound the pavement. You've got it. They're getting local. They're out there every day. They're meeting with mom and pops. They're talking to local brokers. There is no, like, the unicorn is you're going to magically find this deal that's going to fall into your lap. It doesn't actually work that way. It actually takes a lot of work.
Are you guys anybody else on the panel doing like any type of specific marketing efforts to find these, and what are those types of efforts? Like, how do you guys go about doing that? Obviously, you got 1% of the people here that's really going to do anything, right? So as far as going out and doing a marketing strategy, so I'd love to be able to just hear what you guys are doing right now to find these. I'm one of the people that's going to go do something.
We don't have a marketing program where we try, where we blast out an email, come sell your property to us. I think the best thing is trying to find, hitting the pavement, cold calling, finding sellers. It's hard work right now, but I mean, for every 50 deals you look for, if you find one in real estate, that's a victory. So just trying to identify deals or markets that you like, pick up the phone, try and find out who's on title. That's where our organization creates a lot of value, is trying to buy at a good valuation, finding people that need to sell, or finding complicated, difficult deals that not everyone wants to buy.
It was interesting. I was mentioning to one of my associates earlier today that CoStar, because they have now a national database, it'd be really interesting to set up a marketing strategy to go to all the multifamilies in specific markets in CoStar and do skip tracing and find out who the owners are through the LLCs and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of work, but now you have a real good subset of off-market properties that you can consistently market to, or go to the brokers that already have a lot of this information.
No, we have one person that their sole responsibility all day long is pretty much doing that exactly, finding who owns the deals, cold calling them.
And how many out of that, you have a full-time person, like how often do you buy a building? Like once a year, or once a,
in the past year we've closed one deal that he sourced, but we typically close anywhere between 4 and 8 deals a year.
Okay, but it's the top of the market as well. It's just tougher at this time. So realize that, guys. That's a full-time person doing nothing but marketing, trying to find deals, and they're finding one that works in this market. But that one deal probably made the guy's year, so it's great. But that marketing effort, that you have to put that in order to get these. You will not find this stuff. You might get real lucky and one might fall in your lap, but that one that falls in your lap may slap you in the face too. So,
and very rarely do you call someone and say, "Hey, I'm looking for this," and they go, "Oh yeah, I'll sell it to you. I got that." You develop the long-term relationships. You call them every month. You call them every 3 months. Call them 2 years later. That's creating relationships in this industry is just huge.
It's that 12th hit on somebody when they feel like you're your best friend psychologically. So this is all from sales classes and things like that you learn. But it's really interesting doing that because it's all relationships. Paul, how are you finding your stuff right now is it all the same?
We have a serious marketing campaign. So we know each lot and where we want to buy, so we send them direct mail every month. We have a great relationship with brokers, so we know which we have like personal relation with them. We tell them what we want to buy. They're knocking on doors. They're cold calling for us. We're shotgun approaching offers and just see which one lands. And it just takes time. We're in escrow on a deal right now in Hollywood. We're going to build 14 townhomes, and we've been negotiating with a seller for like 2 years.
Wait. You're going under 20 for that one?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yes.
See, there you go. 14.
14 units. No,
they're townhomes, so like there you go.
He took your advice, Jeff.
Yes. And then going back to the first, when we decide to sell, we believe in I heard this, I thought it was pretty funny, I'll share it. It was like, he's crazy enough to submit me this offer, I'm crazy enough not to accept. So we just want a long-term hold, and that's how, my belief, that's how you build real wealth.
Okay. Andrew, where are your deals coming from? Where are your clients' deals? Like, where are you seeing them capture these from?
Yeah, we see a lot of 1031 exchanges, and so what we see in that is that people are getting them on market, and the competition is just crazy. So people are overpaying, and you're probably losing out to these people because they're just trying to put that cash back to work and not pay taxes on it. But where we see people buying good deals are all off market, right? They're brought to them by brokers or their relationships that they've cultivated, and it's hard, long, grueling hours of picking up the phone and meeting people in person and doing, finding those yourself, trying to find that gem. But because it's really hard to find a well-priced on-market deal that doesn't attract a ton of attention.
Yeah, go ahead.
What technology or CRMs or anything like that do you use to track or to stay on top of deals if there's something that you find, or even just with other brokers or other people in the industry? How do you keep that all?
The question was technology on tracking leads, basically a CRM system. Do you guys use Excel?
Excel, yeah. Seriously, I've got a template every day of all the different people that I call, and my memory's not too good, so I have little notes of what I said to them last time. But yeah, just Excel and just tracking it. If you have any suggestions, I'll take it.
We use Podio. Podio's pretty good.
Yeah. Customizable.
We're on sort of the other side of the business, but we use Salesforce, and it's amazing because it's customizable. It's expensive, but it's nice because you can use it for so many different functions.
We use Lion Desk if you're looking for ones to check out as well. It's more residential than multifamily, but yeah, go ahead.
Question. So I know a lot of big markets like places like LA, San Francisco, Dallas, much harder because there's a lot more attention, institutional money, bigger things. Could there be an advantage as a smaller investor going to smaller metros of 200,000 to 400,000 that are growing areas? Could that be maybe an advantage versus all these big areas are now just we're not seeing the returns that we did?
Yeah, I'd say 100%. Because if institutions, their cost of capital, the investment return that they're trying to get is low. That's why when we're trying to get 8%, institutions are trying to get probably 6%. So that's why we can't buy that really nice Class A stuff. And we go into tertiary markets. We bought a lot of stuff in Central Valley of California and have just done phenomenal, especially, path of progress. Just find those tertiary markets or secondary and look at the demographics. We love that story.
Yeah. It's a big deal even in the Midwest right now. People are just throwing money at properties as well, and they're paying top dollar, like Andrew was saying, for these things just to park money in different assets, whether it's smart or not. And a lot of them are going based on pro forma. I know brokers that throw people in properties just to get them rented because they're like, sweet, they're going to get rented, and then they'll get their financing, and then it'll be vacant again. So,
There's your question.
Can I pop in on that first? We call it chasing yield, right? Especially in Southern California. People are going outside of the state. They're going to Texas. They're going to Florida. They're going to Michigan, Ohio, Columbus, right? They're going to all these places because you can get maybe a better cap rate. You can get more cash flow. But we always say you got to do your diligence, right? At the end of the day, you got to follow the job growth. You got to follow the economic drivers of the area. Why is it thriving? Are people moving there? What's the crime like? I mean, you really got to do your homework on these smaller markets as well, because these are the same markets that go up in an up market and have cratered in down markets, right? We've seen Vegas, we've seen Phoenix, we've seen different places, and we could name them over and again, and they've had success. So just make sure that when you're getting into it, it's solid, you're not over leveraged. And just one point that I like to make too, sort of picking on myself, is we always talk about how this time it's different because our underwriting is so strict and our credit's so good. But the interesting part about Fannie and Freddie is when they look at a multifamily deal, it's debt service constrained. It's 125 if it's in Santa Monica or if it's in Summerlin, Nevada, right? And so in my head, I look at that and I go, well, wait a minute, are those two the same credit risk? And the answer is clearly no, right? Santa Monica is the better bet, and you can get less loan proceeds, but they're really making the same loan at the end of it. They'll give you actually more leverage in a tertiary market. So you got to be careful not to over leverage yourself and to do your homework on where were rents in the recession. What's my bottom break even?
The question I have is multi-question. Is you have efficiency?
Multifamily question.
Multifamily. You got the efficiency. You have 1 bedroom. You have 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. What's the advantage of owning each of them, and what is disadvantage? And why don't you concentrate on perhaps on the efficiency? Are they bringing more money in?
So you're asking about unit size, 1 versus 2 versus 3 bedrooms. Yeah. Why don't you take a first shot at that one?
Yeah, we usually try to build as much as we can, but we're limited by parking. So parking in LA is a pain in the butt. So for 1 bedrooms, we need 1 space. For 2 bedrooms, we need 2 spaces. For 1 bedrooms, 1.5, but then we always use a reduction. So if we can build 2 bedrooms, we will build. But in our experience, on the buildings that do have 2 bedrooms, they rent slower than 1 bedrooms. It's a price point thing in LA. So the lower the price point, the faster it'll rent because everything's so damn expensive. So our experience is 1 bedrooms are better. They rent faster. We get a higher price per square foot on the rent. So we like most of our units are 1 bedrooms.
On the flip side, from a lender's perspective, sometimes price per square foot isn't a great gauge because the higher you go on that, the higher it is for us to justify it when we look at comps. So if you're building smaller units, you might nominally be getting less rent, right? So more people are going to you, but on a per square foot basis, you're higher than all the other comps. So as a lender, I'm going to say, you know what? We're not going to go off that $4 a foot. The market's $3.50, right? And so now all of a sudden you're limited on your loan dollars.
And then we argue.
Well, that's one thing one thing to be cognizant of with studios. If you're going to hold this for a long term and you have a lot of studios, I don't know many people who have said, "Ooh, I want to live in this studio for as long as I can." So when people move, that's an expense. That's a very expensive hit for a landlord. So if you have a lot of studios, there's nothing wrong with that. But make sure you're expecting to have a lot of turn costs. They move, new carpet, new paint, whatever it is. So that's just one thing to be cognizant of with studios.
The rent increase doesn't justify the yet.
Well, let's hope rents are increasing. Let's say it doesn't. Steve, will they?
Let's hope your vacancy period's short too, right? So it's expensive to not have somebody in that unit.
And one point on parking too. So in places like the East Bay, I'm working on a development in El Cerrito. I may have mentioned it, but it's 50 units and they have 34 parking stalls, right? So it's a sub 1-to-1 parking ratio because it's TOD, transit oriented development. Remember that. That's going to be huge. It's huge in LA. It's huge in the Bay Area. These major metros, TOD. You will get incentives. You will get unit. What am I trying to say? Density, thank you, density incentives. And so you will be able to build more. There's oftentimes an affordable component that you have to hit, but the numbers make more sense. So if you can find sites or especially if you're building ground up, what's close to the public transit, close to the bus lines, whatever falls into the city's regulations of TOD, slam dunk.
We've only got a few more minutes, so look, a couple things to talk about before we wrap up. Mostly deal structuring, and Steve, I want to start with you on this because clearly so much of your clients are buying things for tax advantages as well. How are they buying multifamily? Are they using LLCs? Are they using family office? Or
so we're using almost exclusively LLCs, and the reason that we're using is we're trying to segregate potential liabilities, right? So as long as you properly form and properly operate an entity, any liability that arises will stay inside that entity. So especially in a family office where we might have 40 or 60 properties, we certainly don't want something going on in one property dragging down multiple other properties. So we're always structuring it inside an LLC. Now for a small or a first-time person, I'm going to go the other direction, and I'm going to say you need to keep as much drag off of your properties as you possibly can. So there might be more cost-effective ways for you to do it. Maybe you insure against potential risks, right? But one of the last things I think you want to do as a startup is to all of a sudden incur a bunch of expense that you're going to have to cover.
Paul, you guys syndicating your stuff, or is it all your money? How do you structure your deals?
Yeah, we syndicate our projects. So we create an LLC. LLC buys the projects. Us and the investors put in the equity for the project. Usually around 30% of the total cost is equity from us and the investors. And then we'll get a construction loan from the bank for the other 70%. And that's how we structure our projects.
Yep.
Yeah.
Scott?
Very similar. Syndicate them. We've been buying some deals on our own with our own internal funds, but for the most part, we syndicate. And one thing I will say that's unique is, or maybe not unique, is we are profit driven. So we don't like building up a lot of fees to our investors. We like being incentivized to do good deals, not to do lots of deals. And I think in the long run, that's very beneficial for us as our investors keep on coming back to us.
Andrew, last topic we'll talk about, and we'll start with you. So clearly part of today is also talking about what should you be doing in today's market. How do you follow today's market? How do you follow economic data? How are you staying abreast of where the market is and using that to, educate yourself on advising on certain deal structures?
Yeah, I'm unique because I read a lot of data, and we have a lot of data, and I like to immerse myself in it. So I look at what we have, and I try and understand where my clients are operating, investing, renovating. Right? I want to know when my client's buying in Tucson, what cap rate it is, what they can renovate for per door. Right? Because when a deal comes in the door, I need to know immediately whether or not this is a starter or a non-starter, if it's something we need to get serious about. And so it's really just being a part of, be an extension of your client, be an extension of the deal, understanding the market. You have to know your markets inside and out in multifamily, because you can get hurt if you don't. And so the one thing I would say is just do as much homework on a couple of markets or one market that you really feel comfortable in, and dive head first into that and do years of research, and then start investing in that market. Know everything about it.
Stephen, what about you? I know you are an economics geek.
I'm not giving any economic advice this time.
I didn't say give advice. Just what do you follow?
What do I follow? So we've talked about this before. Like almost nothing coming from the government can be relied upon as being accurate. So there are some websites out there. One of them is called Shadow Stats. I know a lot of people are familiar with that. If Jeremy Roll were in here, he would take over and talk about Shadow Stats. So they produce the real economic data, like the data was produced back in the 60s and 70s before it was all manipulated. But I want to kind of just parrot something that Andrew just said, which is if you're going into a market, you need to know everything about that market. You need to understand, what the drivers are in that market. What's the median household income? What's the industry there? What's the long-term prognosis for the industry there? Right? Is it tech? Is it manufacturing? Is it manufacturing that's likely to go offshore? So I think if you want to get into this, you've got to really become an expert in that individual microclimate that you're looking at acquiring a property in.
Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, same thing that we've said. The demographics are, in my opinion, the most important. Job growth, units being built. I think those are the keys. Rent, really understand your rent. So we're subscribed to CoStar, so we constantly look at a CoStar. I have a negative friend who always sends me negative news about how the world's ending. So even though it's annoying, I appreciate this guy because maybe one day he'll save us.
Is his name Steven?
I'm going to be right one day. When there's a complete collapse, I'm going to be standing there saying, I knew it.
Absolutely. Scott, what about you?
One of the best things if you're looking at specific markets is the local or city business journal. Just find out what's going on with businesses. Call the local commerce department or city government and find out what's being built there, what's going on. We look at a number of different economic research engines, but the business journals and just being in those locations and calling, I think, is one of the best ways to find out.
Brokers in the market, huge resource. When you're looking at a deal and it's being marketed, and right, talk to that broker, talk to the competing brokers, ask what you're missing in that deal. Why is it selling at that price? How did they get the rent? You pick these guys apart. It's their job to sell it. It's their job to know it inside and out. So you should be hammering on them. And then I'll give you just one last example. This deal in the East Bay, I'm calling up competitive apartments and posing as a renter and trying to find out what I can get for a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 3 blocks away, and what kind of amenities they have, and why should I go to this one when I know I heard there's a new one getting built down the street, right? And asking the property manager what's so good about this area, what all that stuff. So there's creative ways to do it, and there's cheap ways to do it, and then there's you can pay for CoStar and find the data and look at it that way. But it's a combination of a little bit of everything.
So in other words, tap the brokers and all their expertise. Just don't trust their flowcharts. Okay, just checking to make sure. Cool. All right, well, it's a little after 9 o'clock, so we're going to wrap it up. Let me get a round of applause for these guys.